Welcome to Nightingale. We'll help you to navigate your STEM career. Brought to you by KCL Women in STEM. Welcome back to the second episode of Nightingale, helping you navigate your STEM career. I'm Anel, and today I'm joined by Rita Kakati-Shah. So you might already remember Rita from the Women Entrepreneurship event we had back in November. But in case you've missed it, Rita graduated from the King's Business School in 2001 with a degree in mathematics and management. And she's actually actively involved with the King's Leadership Mentorship Program, Diversity Mentoring Program, Entrepreneurial Institute, and she's also a member of New York and Los Angeles Alumni communities. She was also awarded the International Alumnus of the Year Award. And she is now an award-winning gender diversity, inclusion, and career strategist, speaker, and advisor for Fortune 500 companies. She's also the founder and CEO of UMA, an international platform that partners with organizations to attract, retain, and develop women and minorities in the workforce. So, hi Rita, thank you for joining us today. How are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure for us. I guess we'll just go straight to the question. So I remember during the event, you have told us how you started like a completed degree at King's and then you switched to mathematics with management. So what caused you to reach this decision? Like, how did you go about transferring from your degree?
Yeah, so that was a great question. So I come from a background, so my parents are from Assam. They moved to the UK way back when. So my brother and I were born in the UK. And just from a young age onwards, we were brought up thinking we would follow in our parents, in our family footsteps and become a doctor. And that is really how we were brought up. So when it came to almost coming to university, my choices were, to study subjects that would lead me to a medical career. And back in my day, in the sort of late 90s in school, education was very spoon-fed. So you would just sort of copy down what was on the whiteboard or the blackboard back in my day, and you would just learn it. Exams would come around, you would just memorize it, and you would regurgitate the content back. So I was always very good at my studies. I did really well at exams, and I thought, okay, yes, I'm going to be a doctor. That's just what it was. So I got to medical school, and I did my preclinical medicine. But from day one, there was something that just didn't feel right. So when you go to university, and you know this as well, you aren't just spoon-fed education. You have to make notes yourself. It's the responsibility and the onus is on you to learn and determine how you're going to get that information. So when that came to me, I was like, this is not what I'm used to. And wow, this subject, the topic, I don't actually know if I enjoy that. I would find myself just sort of not going to anatomy classes. I would not just like the smell and the looks and sights of dead bodies. It just wasn't something that was my cup of tea. So it was things like that. I would do very well in my exams though. So even if I wouldn't always attend my classes, I would get distinctions in my exams because I had that ability to just learn, memorize, and regurgitate. So I got through like that in 2 years of my preclinical medicine. And I was telling my parents, or my mom anyway, I would confide and say, Mom, this doesn't feel right. But, even my tutor at the time at university was very much like, well, nobody likes medicine to start with. It's a kind of subject that, you've got to like really work hard on. But I was doing really well at exams. So there was just something else. I made the decision myself to think, okay, this doesn't feel right. I want to do something else. And it was the toughest decision at that time in my life because I had never, ever made anything like that. The reason it was the toughest wasn't just because I was switching into something unknown. It was because I felt I was letting my family down. I thought I was letting my parents down. And that was the toughest choice and decision I could have made back then. But when I decided to make that break, I thought, okay, now what do I do? So I remember I always enjoyed mathematics at school. I loved the languages in general, but French, that was something I always loved. And I loved art. I would always find myself when I had any spare time, sort of just doodling away, making creations, things like that. So then I thought, okay, what options does that leave me? I thought, okay, well, French, and I used to go to Paris in particular quite a lot. And, you could just hit the Eurostar and you'd be there. And when you're immersed, that was the best way to really practice and learn any language, really. With art, I thought, well, I do like to go to art galleries. That is something that if I love it, and I really do, I'm always going to have that creative side of me. But I thought with mathematics, so that's not something you can just sort of potter away with on your own. It's something that you do need some sort of formal guidance on. So that's when I thought, okay, I'm going to do mathematics. So I wrote to, at the time, the head of the math department at King's. He was like, yeah, well, welcome on. I think I met him and we had a brief little chat and, just managed to transfer across. I was in University of London, so that was straightforward. And then a week before term started, I kind of thought to myself, I was like, just watching the news, and I thought, what are stocks and shares? What is all this stuff about finance? I know nothing about that. And I thought, I kind of want to learn. I want to do something really different, and I want to learn about that. So I switched my degree from mathematics to mathematics and business management. And that's how that journey started. It was completely unknown. It was completely taking me out of my comfort zone. But at that point, I had nothing to lose. At that point, I thought, I'm doing this for me, and I want to really do something that I can learn about, that I really want to learn about. That's something that really kind of interested me. So I enjoyed it. That's how I chose my degree, and I've just really enjoyed the experience.
I think that's a very brave decision to do, especially like back then when you had a lot of pressure from your parents, especially like you mentioned how you were raised. And I think a lot of girls have some sort of like a vision they don't need to let their parents down. So what was your parents' reaction when you told them that you were switching to a different degree?
Initially, I think my mum saw it might have been coming. I don't think she actually thought I would do it, because she was the one person I would confide in during these 2 years when I just wasn't happy and whatnot. My dad was shocked. He actually thought I was letting him down. I remember he wouldn't even talk to me for a little while. It was really, really tough. So all of the stereotypes and all of the things I thought might happen did happen. But that was it. I thought, and I put more on myself to think, okay, now I'm standing on my own 2 feet for the first time now. I've got to decide and make the right choices. So in a way, I'd almost grown up overnight from just being a kid, being directed to go here, there, and everywhere, to think, okay, now I'm going into adulthood. I'm making decisions. I have to stick with those decisions. These decisions have consequences. So, after getting over the initial tough part, I thought, okay, well, what do I want to do? And then it wasn't just something I just did for the sake of it. I thought, what am I going to do that I know I'm going to enjoy, that one day hopefully this is going to lead to something, and I'm going to make my parents proud. I do want to still be there for them and do everything. And that's what it was. But I didn't know what at that time. It was just that moment of, okay, I know in their eyes, I might have sort of gone off the path or whatever, but I now have to show them that you put this trust on me. I'm going to do something about this.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And I'm pretty sure you didn't ever regret your decision that you made back then.
Oh, absolutely. It was no turning back at that point,
I think that's like the most important part, because a lot of us just graduate with a degree, have a huge debt. They regret that they ever did that degree that didn't really make sense to them.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, like, no matter what you do in your degree, in your education, a lot of it isn't completely relatable to whatever job you're going to do. A lot of careers sort of say, oh, if you've studied this or this, it helps. But you're not actually going to be doing this or this unless you're in a really niche, structured, quant type of position where you're actually going to be structuring those products. You're not probably going to need most of it. So I tell people all the time that as long as you've enjoyed studying that, and there are certain skills and theoretical parts that you're learning, that's what is important, what counts. And a lot of companies, that's what they're looking for, that spirit, that ability to learn, that desire to be flexible and learn as well.
Yeah, I think those like transferable skills that you get from your degree.
Yeah,
definitely. So after your graduation, you began your professional career at Goldman Sachs in London, where like later you were awarded different awards, such as the Excellence in Citizenship and Diversity Award for outstanding contributions and diversity inclusion initiatives at Goldman Sachs International. That is really impressive. But I actually remember how you told us how you started your career at Goldman, when you just met one of the recruiters and like you later had around like 32 interviews before you became a trader. So can you tell us this story again and tell us how was your time there?
Sure. Yeah, great memory, by the way. So yes, my encounter initially at Goldman was by chance. So this is when I was, happy-go-lucky. I was enjoying my education at this point. I did not put any pressure on myself. I was in my first year, and there was a careers fair at King's in the main Strand campus. And I just accompanied a friend of mine. She was in the year above. So I didn't actually even go inside the careers fair. We went together and she went in and I just sat outside. I said, okay, I'll just hang out here. And this was like the pre-smartphone days. So I was just picking up a book or reading something. And this lady, she was on her way out and she kind of just, I don't know, something, we just had this conversation about something. And then we just got talking just about life, about where things are going, just discussing different issues or whatnot. There was nothing in particular, nothing to do with finance, that's for sure. We were just chatting, but it was a great conversation. I would say a good 45 minutes later, my friend came back and the lady was like, oh, it was great chatting. Would love to continue our conversations. My office is actually just down the road from here. She took out a business card and gave it to me. She goes, I would love you to come down and maybe meet some of my colleagues. She happened to be the global head of HR at Goldman. And that's how, long story short, that journey with banking started, by that chance encounter. And, you know, Goldman's Fleet Street office was literally down the road from King's anyway. So yes, and that's how it started. And again, I did not put any pressure on myself, went along and I did have 32 interviews before they decided they could place me somewhere. And I got placed initially in the equities division where I was in pan-European sales trading. And the reason it was 32 interviews is because of the fact that I interviewed with so many different divisions. I didn't go in thinking, oh yes, I want to do this, I want to do that. But there was bits of my personality and that willingness and that real desire to find out more about just different concepts and things. And I think that's what they liked as well. And then it took a long time to decide. But that's how my journey started in the world of finance. Goldman was my first and only job out of university. And I absolutely loved it. And, you know, I think I fell into diversity and inclusion from day one without it really even officially being known as that. So, you know, I was one of very few women on the trading floor at the time. And I remember when we were doing our trainings as summer analysts, as interns, we got to meet people from different divisions. And that was amazing, not just because it was quite social. And when you're a student, you love doing social things, but because of the fact that you got to experience what went on in different divisions, which doesn't always happen when you're kind of siloed and you're stuck in one area. So it was things like that I loved. And I thought, why don't we see that more of anyway in our day-to-day jobs? So that's really what helped have conversations about sort of growing a formal women's network and building an Asian professionals network from scratch. So that's where initially my diversity, the gender diversity and sort of the cultural love for doing that came from, just because I thought, okay, what's missing? What would be good to have? What would benefit other people? And at the time, you know, I had to put together a business plan. So I got other sort of folks interested, different stakeholders in leadership roles on the floor in equities and said, hey, what do you think of the idea? Let's do this. And that's what it was. You know, now, you know, everyone has different sort of networks and groups and everything. But back then that wasn't the case. So that's where that led to, and that's where that started from. And then, yeah, I started off my career on the equities trading floor. I was in capital markets for a bit, switched over to fixed income. So I said, you know, I was there for a good 10 years at Goldman and, you know, I was in different areas. I was in projects role and operations. So I would spend time definitely in, you know, listening and feeling and getting to admire just so many different areas of the firm and absolutely loved it. Yeah. So that was my my Goldman journey.
That sounds like an incredible journey, especially from someone who has just graduated. I would say like from someone who is about to graduate, that's definitely a very inspiring story. So you've mentioned you have created a network, and was there something else, perhaps like you have experienced any like discrimination or just like a prejudice, as it was pretty uncommon back then to see a woman on a trading floor, or maybe when you were studying towards a degree in mathematics? And yeah, if so, like how did you overcome it?
Yeah, that's great question, actually. So yeah, I mean, being on the floor, and it was a very male-dominated scenario, there were occasions when you would sometimes see, you know, incidents that, you know, were sexist towards folks on the floor. From my perspective, though, I didn't have it towards me. And I think one of the reasons is, so I've always been a very social person. I've experienced racism from a young age, you know, at school and things like that. But even from a young age, and it wasn't called, I mean, I didn't know it was called racism back then. I just thought it was because of, I just didn't know. I was like, okay, I do look a bit different to everyone else, but I didn't think it's because of my color. I just didn't know. So what I would do is I was always great at just chatting and getting along with people. So I would sort of almost turn it around and end up being friends with the aggressors without realizing it. So that's how I became just really, really good at just getting into and getting along with everybody, because I wanted to get involved and be included in games. I didn't want to be left out. And I was like, okay, what are they doing that I'm not? Okay, let me just get in there. And I would just like ask questions, get in there. And then after a while, you would just be part of the team, part of the gang, and nobody would see you any differently. A lot of it came initially because people didn't know who I was, what my background was. Fast forward to being on the trading floor, initially, until I made my place there, it would be like, okay, who's this brown girl that's coming into a white man world, you know? But I didn't get that, because from day one, I was very much into like, you know, 4:30 on the dot, you know, markets closed, everyone went to the pub next door. I would be there at the pub next door. And no, I wouldn't drink like everybody else. I might have a sip of a beer and leave it there. But that just became the running joke, like Rita's a double parker or whatever. You know, she would, everyone's on the third round, I'm still on my first sip, on my first drink. You know, it was just things like that. But it just, you know, became part of the banter. I would just really just get along with the team that was part of. And you just got to know each other. So I think because of that, that really helped sort of diffuse any areas of being looked at as being somebody different.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of an ability that I had from a young age to do that. And I think that really, really served well, especially on the trading floor, especially when I worked across so many different areas. When I used to go in later on and, you know, getting the network set up, I would be negotiating with people at the top of the firm. But it's almost like I knew how to speak with them, because I knew how to negotiate with my own parents when I was telling them I'm switching degree. So I would be used to things like that and getting through to somebody on a different authority level without thinking, oh yeah, that's where that came from, because I'd done it before in a way. So it's almost just by being relaxed, just always being very authentic about knowing my mission, prepared. I would totally rehearse before I'm going and pitching to senior leadership, like I would practice before I went to speak to my own parents. It was that kind of thing, and these skills that I think helped me fit in. So my advice would be that, yes, there are challenges. Sometimes those challenges come because of our own mental barriers, where we feel like, yes, we are left out because we might look differently, speak differently, think differently. Use that to your advantage and understand where your team is coming from in order to bond with them, if that makes sense.
Totally, yeah. I think that was probably like the best advice I ever heard about how to work when there is some sort of like discrimination towards you, or perhaps like a possibility even of that to happen. I think that's very impressive. And I'm glad that you have brought it up, some of the stories that you had studying from back when you were young until you came to Goldman. That is very impressive. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, of course, you're welcome.
What would be like some of your top tips, like for students who have less background in the financial field, but I guess like some technical background, but they're looking to get into it after finishing their degree?
Yeah, I mean, I think times have changed. Back in my day, certainly you didn't even need any background in finance to go into finance. It was just, you know, skills and a love of learning. These days, obviously, as time goes on, things get more competitive because a lot of people want to be doing the same thing. So I think check what the minimum requirements are. These days, there's always some sort of, you know, people can code these days. That wasn't a requirement in my day, but you don't have to be going into a STEM area to have that background. People are now just able to code. So see what those are. Genuinely have a desire to do that. So it's not like, okay, I've just ticked off a box because everyone else has. It's like, okay, why? What have I coded and why? What is the purpose of it? What have I built with that? Even if it's something simple, show that you're doing something that is different and unique and you've thought about it. Because what a lot of people like to do and think is that I'm inviting you into my firm. What stands you out from the rest of the crowd? It's your ability to think. If you're going into a trading role, it's about being able to react well under pressure, not letting pressure get to you and stress. So you might be very much put in that situation in an interview on purpose to see how do you react. Do you crumble, or do you sort of take a deep breath and sort of deal with it? They might ask you a question that they know you're going to mess up the answer on, but they want to see how you react to that. And also when they say something like, oh my gosh, like really, is that what you think the answer is? How do you react? Because there are going to be pressurized times and they want to know how do you deal with that. So I think you just have to be very flexible. Research the area. There are definitely books out there. There are definitely so many blogs out there now. There are YouTube reels out there, Vimeos out there on people that have been in these industries and what they're finding, and find out, is this the situation? Is this how you picture yourself going? What could you add to the industry? What really interests you about that industry, rather than you have a resume that might look incredible. Everybody does now. What is it really about you that, John, is it something you've done? Is it a volunteer project you've done during your time at King's, for example, that you really like, that you did something extra with? Because it's great being part of a team and doing a project, but what do you do with that? How does that help impact something or somebody? A lot of these firms, the finance firms, they have corporate social responsibility arms, and they're supporting different mission-driven businesses out there. Check those out. What are they supporting and why? Is there something from your background that you're also passionate about that links with that aim as well? So find that nugget that stands you apart, that is genuine, to connect you with the firm. And on top of that, yes, you do have to tick the boxes of, yes, if people are all doing coding right now, if they've got excellent results, those are sort of things that are at a minimum these days as well.
Yeah, definitely. Just stay on top of the game. Make sure you know what's happening in the industry in general. And if there's like coding or like any other sort of skills that you need to pick up, because times are changing. And I think like 10 years ago, you probably won't need to know coding. But now, if you know it, it's like knowing English. It's kind of a requirement now.
Exactly. Yeah.
What would you also recommend to like students to do in those high stress situations that you've mentioned, like during the interviews? How example, like what would you recommend for them to consider when they're preparing for the interviews?
Yeah, great question. I think prepare is the magic word. So don't just go in thinking, oh yeah, I know this stuff, or I've read up on it, I'm going to go in. Really, really practice your delivery, prepare. You're going to get asked some very kind of cliched questions like, oh, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Prepare your responses in advance. Some people you might be going into a role that might require you to sell something at some point in the future. So in one of my 32 interviews, I was given a gray brick. And I was asked to sell it in 20 seconds, and they would time it. So just things like that, like how on earth are you going to sell something that is unsellable? The point being is like, you've got to think of your enthusiasm and, your creativity comes. It was funny, I made it funny. I was like, yeah, like, whatever it was, like just made it into something that you could not live without, this huge sort of superpowered thing, an object that changes when you believe in it or whatever. I made something up, but the point being is that you've got to have fun with it. You've got to play with it. You've got to show you have a little bit of a sense of humor, because times are going to be tough, and that's part of it. I say LinkedIn is a great platform as well. Those who aren't actively on LinkedIn start getting more active. Connections of connections, see who they have in those companies and start sort of casually just reaching out. First, look at what they're doing, what is their background, see if there's any posts that they've made before kind of messaging them, and see what their posts are, read about them and start commenting on their posts, because then they will see it. And that's one way of engaging, because that's a way of thinking, well, do I really resonate with this person? How do I feel approaching a stranger? Because that's what the interview's like, and that's what they're going to be like, because there might be asking you, if it's, going to the fixed income division and you want to in some sort of a sales or trading role there, you've got to be very on top of it with your mental arithmetic. So they, just start practicing that, how kind of quick you are and, your memorization of certain things, and, think of concepts and how you work around them. They don't always want you to get the answer right. They just want to know what is your thought process and what do you do when you get it wrong? Do you crumble? Do you get embarrassed? Do you like, oh, okay, how do I do that? Oh, okay, I understand it. And then you kind of reorient your answer a little bit. So I think practice is the main piece here, but do your research. Definitely look at the website. Look at these stories that people share as well. They're in the division. Read those blogs. A lot of companies have them out now. Definitely read those.
Yeah, practice makes perfect, and there are so many resources out there. I think on LinkedIn, there's so many interesting people. Like I've been following a lot of them, and also helps you to figure out if you're actually interested in something, and helps you to find out more about a certain industry or a company. So after working in finance for nearly a decade, you moved to the US to work in pharmaceuticals industry. So what was the reason for your career shift? Why pharmaceuticals?
Well, here's the thing. I have had zero background in pharmaceuticals at all. During my, years at Goldman, a family friend actually approached me one day and said, hey, Rita, you've got a business background. I'm setting, something up to do with clinical trials and drug development in Delaware. Will you help me? And my first question is, what's Delaware? Not even where is Delaware, because I didn't know what it was. Is it a product? Is it a bar of chocolate? Is it some soap brand? That was the first thing that was like, my question. Long story short, I took a sabbatical initially
Mhm.
from Goldman just to help out, and said, oh, this is something that I really, really enjoyed, because to me, that was an experience I could never have got in a big corporate multinational firm. This was a small company built from scratch, zero procedures and policies. I was used to coming from a big firm where all of the documents, all of your I's are always dotted, your T's are crossed, to not having that. And I was helping in business development in the pharmaceutical world. So I was meeting key opinion leaders, thought leaders in the pharmaceutical area, but specifically in neurology and psychiatry. So anybody who would be the pioneer, a scientist who would develop a certain drug for something, would be the person I was meeting. And it was a fantastic opportunity. I actually enjoyed it. And that's really how I made my shift. For me, that was like something new that I could sort of get my teeth into. And I think that's the point, that so many skills I'd learned during my different roles at Goldman, it made it so easy for me to transition into something else. So easy, because of the fact that when you're in a professional career, you are learning, different personality types, different areas. Sometimes in the trading areas, the hours were very, very they were shorter and much more intense. Yeah. When I was more in the investment banking areas, they're like longer and more drawn out. So I was used to all of that. I was used to sleep deprivation. I was used to being put under pressure. I was used to all of that. So it was actually great to have all of that. And that's sort of in a nutshell why I decided to make that transition. I was in business development, so I traveled here, there, and everywhere. And that brought me to the US as part of my travels. And I met my husband as well during that time. And then we got married and I settled in New York, which is where I'm currently. And that's had that journey in the pharmaceutical area. And I have two small children who are now, my daughter just turned 6, my son is just turned 8 a couple of days ago. So yeah, life has taken a different toll since then.
Yeah, that was a really life-changing experience for you. Like if you haven't done it, then that's something not really obvious to do after your career at Goldman.
Absolutely.
So what was your experience of moving to a different country?
Yeah, it was. So here's the thing. When I was traveling a lot anyway, I would always be here, there, and everywhere. Business development, I would travel, and I loved it. I was used to that. But when I moved to New York, it was a very different experience. I was not just just taking a suitcase and going back home again to my base. You're actually upping and leaving. It's almost like you're moving your identity. That hit me actually quite hard. And I was confused when I moved because I became homesick, but I didn't know that's what it was. So there would be little things, for example, when I first moved to the US, I had an American Express in the UK that I would use. And I just tried to get myself a US version of it, but it was rejected. And I'm like, what do you mean rejected? That's never happened before. They're like, oh, you don't have any credit history. I said, well, I've got years worth of, professional credit. What do you mean? And I have an American Express. They're like, no, this is US credit. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've studied this. I know about this, but the theory is very different from the practical part of it. And I just almost felt like my independence had been taken away from me. So I moved here on a green card initially because, after I got married. So, and my husband was obviously very, very helpful with everything. But for me, being a +1 wasn't what I was used to. I was always used to being just me, doing everything, that strong, independent woman, setting my own life and my own career path. To being the +1 was a hard transition for me. So it was just things like that, really, that I've encountered initially. And then, my friends and everyone, I left everyone back at home, back in the UK. So that was something that, hit me from a perspective. And I would just become very patriotic about anything British that would come about. I remember when I moved here, it was April of 2011. It was around the time of Will's and Kate's wedding. Oh. So yeah, had I been in the UK, I probably just would have watched it in the background on TV and all would have been well. Here, on the other hand, I was like, oh my gosh, 4 a.m. We have to go to Brooklyn Bridge because it would be 9 a.m. in the UK. We've got to watch it live on some big screen somewhere. And oh gosh, we have to make sure it's recorded so I can watch it back 10 times afterwards. So, things like that. And yes, I'm exaggerating a bit, but just trying to show you the point that, I was just so missing my roots that I really wanted anything to kind of build on that as well. So that was my experience really of moving here. It took me one to get used to.
So did you feel as though you had to sort of reinvent yourself and start your life from scratch when you have already so much experience up to this point, but then your life sort of started again?
Yeah, actually, very good point. So that's exactly what happened. So I actually just completely just submersed myself in my work. Because remember, I came over when I was still in the pharmaceutical industry and I was still in business development. So I'd still be traveling and whatnot, but I got so immersed in my work. And part of that was because that was the continuation from the UK. So I continued, did that and everything, and kept doing that. And then soon after, I was pregnant for my son. And I remember initially when I was pregnant, I didn't realize it initially. And then I was on a business trip, and then slowly I started to feel sick on flights and things. And I would try to cover it up because I was in business development and I did not want my pregnancy to stop me from being able to work. And because it's a very fierce industry, you've missed one meeting, you've missed a deal. And it was very, very deal driven. And I was very good at, speaking to people and getting deals done. So I remember at the time, my go-to drink was gin and tonic, G&T, very British. And I would just go to the bars like I always did. And I would just, tip the barman and say, look, I'm going to order every time anyone orders me a G&T, because they know that's my go-to drink, make sure it's just water with a slice of lime. And you just pass that, and I'm paying you in advance to do that. And that's how I would do it on pretty much all of my business trips until I was showing and until it got to a stage where I just couldn't travel anymore. So that's what I would do just to continue working. And also it was a good distraction for me because the minute I felt sick, because morning sickness isn't in the morning, I don't know why it was ever called that. It's all day sickness. But by distracting myself and getting into the work, it would be distracting myself from the sickness. Because I did that, a couple of times at the weekends, I would but then I couldn't get anything done. But the busier I was, and the more forceful I was to get distracted and do something, the less the sickness would affect me. So that's what I did. I did that. And then it could get to a stage where I, come back to New York and I had a chat with my boss at the time about, let's make plans for the future. I'd never thought of ever taking time off other than just whatever the initial period was, because, I was very career oriented. I was very what are we going to do? How are we going to build the business? But I knew I remembered in the UK that you can, you get up to a year off maternity leave and then, some sort of, paid maternity leave and some sort of mentoring, getting back again. I had that in the back of my mind. So I chatted to my boss at the time. I said, hey, this is happening. What are we going to do? What's the plan? And he was really shocked. And he said, there is no plan. Here I can give you 6 weeks off. It'll be unpaid, but you have to file your own disability claim to get that. And it almost felt, I went into that meeting feeling really excited, planning mood. And that almost felt like it was just a slap in the face. I had not seen that coming. And it almost felt like, from a professional to just reduced to nothing. And it wasn't my boss's fault in hindsight. He did not know. The system here, the system in the US isn't built to support women in the workforce. It just isn't. Companies are slowly starting to do things about it, but just generally it's not built that way. There's a big divide for, either you just completely quit your job and then, you go into the whole world of motherhood or parenthood. And then at some point you go back in, or you just literally do that 6 weeks off. Your body's not prepared, you're not prepared, and you go back to work again. And that's pretty much what would have happened. So I remember going in and I just felt like it just didn't feel right. It felt almost like I was insulted as a person. And I thought, you know what, this isn't right. So I quit my job and I took 3.5, almost 4 years off to raise my 2 kids now. And I've got to tell you that out of all of the jobs I've ever done, and I thought, banking was tough, working sometimes 24/7. I thought being in business development was tough, crossing time zones and just being jet lagged. That was nothing compared to being a full-time mom. Oh my goodness. And I was surprised. I never, took my mom for granted ever again. It's like you're working 24/7, you're up, but you just can never take a sick day. You're constantly sleep deprived. You are always on it and you have to get so much done all the time. You have to coordinate multiple things all the time. And I'm like, wow, power to you out there, mums and dads who do that full time. It's incredible. And then I found, my new best friends were fellow mums who were, came from professional backgrounds and who took some time off like I did. But I used to hear their stories that, they, because of the 4-week or the 6-week rule about getting back, they were like, some of them just felt like they couldn't get back again. It was very difficult. It was not made easy to go back. Now a gap on your CV And that is translated to you being a quitter, you being someone who's not a go-getter anymore. And that's what happened to me. You know, I thought, you know, 3.5 years in, almost 4, I was like, oh, let me start exploring what's out there in the world. And I met, you know, friends of mine for coffee in finance and pharmaceuticals. I didn't know which direction I wanted to go. I just wanted to explore it again. But I was surprised at the kind of questions I was getting. Not once did anyone sort of ask me about the background or what I could have given back to the workforce. It was very focused, like it was some sort of fixation on that 3.5-year gap on my CV. I didn't know that I had to fill a gap when I was going to meet with friends for coffees. That wasn't something that I just knew about. So it was just very much something that I was super, super shocked about. And that's really what planted the seeds for me starting UMA.
Yeah.
The journey that I'm in now, because of the fact that UMA is an empowerment platform and it's an amalgamation of my own life experiences, you know. It's a platform that, you know, it's built on empowering confidence. It's about sort of inspiring success, both personally and professionally. They're very much entwined. And it's also about sort of building that resilience and that grit in women and minorities in the workforce. And that is exactly what, you know, I've been doing for the last now 4.5 years. And that was completely born out of journey of my experiences and what I felt personally when I was looking to get back into the workforce again.
Thank you for sharing this story. That was actually my next question in terms of like how you came to entrepreneurship, but I guess you have answered that already. And I was shocked when your boss told you pregnancy is a disability, which is not, and working a full-time mom is actually a full-time job as well. It's not like a gap on your resume. You were actually working full-time, but it's just an unpaid work. And yeah, what you're doing with UMA is incredible, and I'm definitely sure it's life-changing for a lot of women out there. I wanted also to ask, so your business idea turned out to be very successful, and you were named the Female Entrepreneur of the Year back in November 2019. What was your secret of building a successful career while having a family and raising children? Looking at your whole story, it is really inspiring. How do you manage to do all this and still be very passionate about life and having a lot of energy?
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you for saying that. I think it's the actual passion for it. It's very mission driven. I think with, you know, to answer your question on entrepreneurship as well, I think when you're an entrepreneur, it's stretching you in many different ways because you are doing so many things at the same time. You are not just the CEO, you are the chief HR person, you are the tech person, you are the finance person, you are everything at the same time. And you're trying to sustain a business. You are initially bootstrapping, you're kind of funding it yourself, and then you go out there and try to raise, you know, finances later. But it's the passion that drives you. For me, it was the passion. I wanted to make a change. I felt there was injustice out there in the way that women and minorities are treated in the workforce and how jobs are done. And I saw that the confidence was the main area that really was a hindering factor. So I thought, I need to form that. There is that gap with getting back and that confidence. When you have confidence, nothing can stop you. Having that self-belief, that drive, which all of us have inside of us, all of us, we just need a bit of reminding now and again. That's pretty much what I do. I just try to help people bring those nuggets out, that best in themselves, and nothing can stop you. But it's that passion that's what drives me. That's what keeps me going. I see what's out there. My 2 children, you know, I call them UMA associates because, you know, they come to meetings with me. I mean, pre-quarantine, pre-COVID, they would come on business trips. Sometimes I wouldn't have a nanny, and okay, here we go, let's come. This is real life. You know, my daughter came to UNESCO with me in Paris, and she stood up there with me when I was doing my keynote. My son has come to me to give a talk to veterans about life and positivity and just being motivated as well. So they have very much seen it, and part of that is what drives me. I want them to see a strong woman who is fighting for something she believes in and something that will make them stronger, and see that. They need to see hard work and resilience for now. They will see me sometimes not have the best day, and they will see me have incredible days. But that is real life. And I don't want to shun or hide from that. You know, back in old school days, like back in my parents' generation and your parents' generation, our folks didn't really show you that emotion that much. There was something they dealt with themselves, and no one really talked about really what work was. You just knew they did a job, and that was their career, and that was it. Now I'm like just getting those conversations across, because that's what makes us more empathetic and understand what it is. What does it mean to be driven by a mission? So it's that drive that is what I'm passionate about, that keeps me going. And that's the drive that reminds me, this is what I'm doing it. I'm doing it because my kids, they see me as their role model. Whatever I do is how they're going to get motivated in their futures. And that is ultimately the driving force.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised how you were taking your children to your business trips. You were doing completely the opposite from what our parents or their parents were doing back then. They were trying to hide this aspect of the real life, and instead you were trying to just show that this is normal. And I think that's definitely what a real role model should be like. What would be your final words of wisdom for women who are currently completing their degrees and are at the very beginning of their career journey?
Oh, well, I think, you know what? I would say congratulations for being in this part of your life. This is the most exciting time for you guys. It doesn't feel that way sometimes because it's, we have COVID, we have quarantine going on, the social distancing and things like that. But treat this like a blessing. The whole of my life, everything that's happened, I've never treated it like, oh, why did that happen? I wish I never did that. Everything is for a reason. I didn't waste 2 years studying medicine. That was my blessing to show me what I should have been doing. Similarly, whatever you do, treat it like it's a blessing, what's happened in the past. What have you learned from that? What can you take into the future? Treat this time that, we have more time with, whether it's remotely or in person, with our families, time to really sort of build and think, what is it we really want to do? Do that research and start thinking about what is it that drives you, and use that to motivate your next steps. This is the exciting time because the world is open right now. There is nothing stopping you from looking for any field that interests you genuinely and a difference that you want to make in your life and into society overall.
Yeah, I think you're passionate and confident and can believe in yourself, as you have told throughout your stories. It's something that was helping you to carry on in life and come to those life-changing decisions because you were pretty much not afraid of getting out of your comfort zone and taking advantage of everything that was available out to you. And I like how you mentioned that you didn't think 2 years at medicine school was a waste of your time. It was actually something that helped you to figure out what you want to do next and get into the right direction of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I said to people, don't be scared of taking risks and always be positive about what's happening.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. So thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your incredible story. And just have a lovely rest of the week. And we wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you so much. And I love what you're doing with this podcast. So, this is brilliant. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Nightingale. Tune in next time for more insights and how to navigate your STEM career.